The first time Victor Halstead noticed the bench, it was because the streetlight beside Meridian Park in Brookhaven was flickering again. He sat in the back seat of his sedan, suit collar loosened, reading the final email of the night. Another signature, another deal, another proof that his life was made of ink and numbers. Quick pause. If you're enjoying this story, subscribe now so you don't miss the next chapter. Let's continue. Home, sir? His driver Elias asked. Victor looked up through the tinted glass. The rain had stopped, leaving the pavement glossy and dark. The park was mostly empty, a tangle of trees and winding paths. Near the western gate, a bench sat half in shadow, half in the weak spill of the failing lamp. Someone was lying on it. At first Victor assumed it was a drunk or someone seeking shelter. He'd donated to charities and smiled for cameras, but he hadn't solved cold nights. Still, something about the figure's posture held him, arms curved protectively, shoulders hunched as if guarding something small. "Stop," Victor said. Elias eased the sedan to the curb. Victor stepped out into the damp air, cold biting his cheeks. He crossed the street, shoes clicking softly. As he drew nearer, the flickering light brightened just enough to show a familiar braid of hair and the edge of a uniform apron. "Mara!" Victor called. The woman didn't move. Victor approached, and then he saw the bundle pressed against her chest, tiny, wrapped in a pale blanket with stitched sailboats. His sister had given him that blanket the day his daughter was born. His heart lurched. "No." Mara stirred, blinking as if waking from a bad dream. When she recognized him, panic flashed across her face. She tightened her arms around the child, shielding her instinctively. "Sir, Mr. Halstead," she whispered. Victor swallowed, forcing his voice to stay low. "Why is my daughter with you?" "I didn't steal her," Mara said quickly, eyes shining. "I would never." "Then explain," Victor insisted, crouching beside the bench. The wood was wet. Mara's hands trembled as she adjusted the blanket, tucking it under the baby's chin with careful devotion. "Your nanny called me," she said. "Ms. Trina. She said she had an emergency and couldn't stay. I tried to reach you, but your phone went to voicemail." Victor's jaw tightened. Trina was the latest in a long line of highly paid strangers. "An emergency," he repeated. "She said her mother fell ill," Mara continued. "She left before I could stop her. Celeste was crying, sir. I couldn't leave her alone. I thought you'd be back soon." Victor's gaze swept Mara's face, pale from cold, lips chapped, and a faint bruise on her cheekbone he'd never noticed before. "So you brought her outside?" Mara flinched. "No. I tried to stay in the building, but the doorman said staff couldn't be in the residence lounge after hours. I stayed in the lobby. Celeste wouldn't stop crying." People stared. Victor's stomach tightened. His tower. His rules. His comfort. "I called security," Mara said, voice cracking. "They told me Celeste wasn't supposed to be with me without written authorization. They said to wait for you. I waited, but the building manager asked me to leave. He said I was causing discomfort." Victor stared at her, heat rising behind his eyes. "And you're home?" he asked, already hearing the answer in her hesitation. Mara looked down. "My landlord locked me out. I'm behind on rent. I didn't want to take Celeste somewhere unsafe, so I came here. Meridian Park is close to your route. I thought if you didn't see us, you'd check the street. I didn't wander far. I sat, and she fell asleep." Celeste shifted, making a soft sighing sound. Victor reached out and brushed a finger along his daughter's forehead. Her skin was cold. "We're going home," he said. Relief washed over Mara so hard it looked like pain. "Yes, sir." Victor stood and pulled off his suit jacket. Without thinking, he wrapped it around Mara and the baby, tucking it tight. "Elias," he called. "Bring the car." Elias hurried over, eyes alert. Victor lifted Celeste gently from Mara's arms. The baby stirred, eyes fluttering open, and when she saw Victor's face she made a small sound, half question, half comfort, then pressed her cheek against his chest. Mara rose unsteadily, rubbing her arms. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Victor looked at her, at the bruise, at the exhausted devotion in her posture. Words he didn't usually speak pushed their way out. "I'm sorry," he answered. Elias opened the car door. Victor climbed in with Celeste, holding her close, and Mara followed, still unsure if the seat beneath her was real. As the sedan pulled away, Victor watched the flickering streetlight shrink behind them. For the first time in years, he understood how easily his world could slip out of his control, not in a boardroom, but on a damp bench under a failing lamp, where loyalty slept beside his child. In the silence of the car, Celeste's breathing steadied, but Victor's thoughts did not. He checked her tiny hands and cheeks. "Heat," he told Elias. "Turn it up." Mara sat rigidly, hands folded as if she might be ordered out at any second. "Did she eat?" Victor asked. "Yes," Mara said. "A bottle at 9. I changed her before we left the lobby. I kept her pacifier in my pocket." Victor nodded, ashamed he didn't know those details as easily as she did. Outside, Brookhaven's towers slid past like black glass. He imagined the lobby scene, neighbors staring, the manager's cold voice, and anger sparked. Not at Mara. At himself, for building a world where the person protecting his child could be treated as an inconvenience. At Halstead Tower, Victor carried Celeste through the main entrance with Mara beside him. The doorman stiffened. Victor's voice stayed calm, but it landed like a gavel. "Mara is authorized to be wherever my daughter is. Effective immediately." The lobby went silent. In the elevator's hush, Victor finally looked at Mara and said, "You did the right thing tonight." Victor carried Celeste into the penthouse as if the marble might judge him for arriving so late. He laid her in the crib, tucked the sailboat blanket around her, and watched her breathe until his pulse slowed. Mara hovered near the doorway, braid coming loose, eyes rimmed red from wind and tears. She looked out of place in a home she maintained so perfectly. "Sit," Victor said, guiding her to the kitchen island. He made tea, clumsy, rushed, and slid the mug to her. "I'm going to ask questions," he added. "Not to accuse you. To understand." Mara nodded. "Trina," Victor said. "When did she call?" "A little after 8, Mara answered. "She said she had a family emergency and had to leave immediately. I tried to stop her. She was already gone." "You tried me," Victor said. "Yes, sir. Twice. Then I texted. I didn't want to bother you." "You should have," Victor replied, more sharply than he intended. He softened. "I should have answered." Silence settled, and Victor noticed the bruise on Mara's cheekbone again. "What happened?" he asked. Mara's fingers rose to touch it. "My landlord," she admitted. "He got angry when I asked for a few days. He pushed me." Victor's stomach turned. "How long have you been behind on rent?" 2 months, she said. "My mother is sick back in San Rivas. I send money. I thought I could catch up." Victor stared, realizing how little he knew about the life Mara stepped back into after leaving his penthouse. "Why didn't you tell me?" "It's not your problem," Mara whispered. Victor looked toward the nursery door. "My daughter was on a park bench," he said quietly. "It became my problem." He picked up his phone and called building security. A supervisor answered, voice guarded. Victor kept his tone calm enough to be dangerous. "Explain why my staff and my child were asked to leave my lobby last night." A pause. "Mr. Halstead, protocol. The manager said residents complained about noise." "A baby cried," Victor said. "And you chose strangers' comfort over my child's safety." He ended the call. "You'll sleep here tonight," he told Mara. Mara's eyes widened. "Sir, I can't." "You can," Victor said. "You won't go back to a man who puts his hands on you." The next morning, Celeste woke babbling, and Mara, still hesitant, lifted her with practiced gentleness. Celeste's face brightened, giggling at the nonsense sounds Mara made. Victor watched, ashamed at how easily Mara reached his daughter's joy when he usually reached only her schedule. "Today," Victor said, "we fix what happened. First was the nanny agency." In a glass office that smelled like citrus cleaner, the supervisor offered apologies shaped like marketing phrases. Victor played Trina's rushed voicemail, then stopped it mid-sentence. "She abandoned my child," Victor said. "You'll cooperate with my attorneys, or we'll do this publicly." The supervisor's smile collapsed. Papers appeared. Names. Addresses. A termination form. Victor signed nothing until the supervisor signed everything. Then they drove to Mara's building in North Brookhaven. The stairwell was narrow and smelled of old oil. Mara shrank as they climbed, as if the walls had trained her to be smaller. Victor knocked. The landlord opened the door a crack, eyes narrowing, then widening at Victor's suit and the quiet bodyguard behind him. "You're Mara's landlord," Victor said. His voice was polite, his words not. "You pushed her. You locked her out. Today you release her from her lease." The man scoffed. "She owes." Victor raised a folder. "You can accept a settlement and sign a release," he said, "or you can explain that bruise to a judge. Choose." The landlord's color drained. He muttered, "Fine," and disappeared to fetch paperwork. Mara stood trembling in the hallway. Victor didn't touch her, but he stood close enough for his presence to be a shield. When the landlord returned, he signed quickly, hands shaking. Victor slid a check across the counter, small money for peace, and watched the man sign a second page, a written statement that he'd ended the lease voluntarily. Mara exhaled like someone allowed to breathe again. "Pack what you need," Victor said. "You're not coming back." By afternoon, Mara's suitcase sat in Victor's guest room. Celeste had a temporary caregiver sourced through Victor's own office, and the building manager waited in the lobby of Halstead Tower with trembling hands. Victor made a point of walking in through the main doors, Mara beside him, Celeste on his hip. The manager began an apology. Victor cut it off with calm precision. "Your protocol failed," he said. "If my staff is ever pushed out again for being uncomfortable to residents, you will not work here." "Yes, Mr. Halstead," the manager whispered. That evening, Victor opened a spreadsheet at the kitchen island and turned the screen toward Mara. "This is a contract," he said. "A housing allowance, health coverage, paid time off, and a line item for your mother's medical care." Mara stared as if the numbers were a different language. "Why?" she asked. Victor looked toward the nursery, where Celeste slept warm and safe. "Because you held my daughter when I wasn't there," he said, voice rough. "And because I'm done pretending loyalty should survive on gratitude alone." Mara's hands hovered over the tablet, unsure where to place them. "If I sign," she said, "people will think I asked for favors." "Let them think," Victor replied. "They already thought you were disposable." She swallowed. "I was scared last night," she admitted. "Not of the cold. Of losing her. Of being blamed." Victor leaned back, forcing himself to meet her eyes. "No one blames you," he said. "Trina will answer for what she did. The building will change. And if anyone questions your place here, they can question me." A small, tired smile flickered across Mara's face. "Thank you," she whispered. Victor nodded once, as if sealing a deal. But this one wasn't for profit. It was for protection. "Starting tonight, you sleep without watching the door again." 3 days after the night at Meridian Park, Victor received the report he demanded. Trina Wexler had been located, confronted, and, after denial, had admitted she left because another family offered more money that same evening. She assumed the housekeeper would handle it, and fled to avoid an argument. The agency apologized, offered a quiet settlement, and promised improved standards. Victor refused quiet. "Public accountability," he told his attorneys. A child was endangered. He drove home early and found Mara on the rug with Celeste, blocks scattered like bright confetti. Celeste squealed, shoving a block into Mara's palm, then stealing it back with delighted mischief. Mara laughed, soft, real, unguarded. Victor paused, realizing how hungry he was for ordinary happiness. Mara looked up and straightened. "Sir." "Victor," he corrected gently. "When we're alone, Victor." She blinked, then nodded, as if names were permissions she didn't know she could accept. "I set up a call," Victor said, "with a specialist in San Rivas. About your mother." Mara's face went still. "My mother?" Victor nodded. "Today." The doctor's video call was brief but clear. Tests, medication, a plan. Mara asked practical questions the way she asked about household supplies. Steady, focused, love translated into logistics. When the call ended, Mara covered her mouth and breathed shakily. "I don't know how to repay you," she whispered. "You don't," Victor said. "You live. You stop surviving." After lunch, Victor met with Halstead Towers manager and security supervisor. He didn't raise his voice. He handed them new written policies. Staff caring for children could use common areas, security would prioritize safety over complaints, and any resident harassing staff would face penalties. He funded training sessions and created a hotline that went directly to his office. "If you don't know what to do," Victor said, "choose the option that keeps a child safe." The lawsuit against Trina moved forward. The agency scrambled. Rumors spread in Brookhaven, but Victor released only a short statement about duty of care and standards. He didn't mention Mara. He wasn't going to turn her into a headline. Trina, however, found a way to force herself back into the story. It happened on a Wednesday morning in the tower's indoor garden. Mara was pushing Celeste's stroller when a woman stepped from behind a column, sunglasses too large, hair pulled tight. "Mara," Trina hissed. "We need to talk." Mara's hands tightened on the stroller. Celeste gurgled, unaware. "You shouldn't be here," Mara said. Trina's mouth twisted. "You ruined my life. Do you know what it's like to care for other people's kids and still be treated like furniture?" Mara stared, shocked by the cruelty of the complaint. "You left her," she said, voice shaking. "You left a baby." Trina stepped closer. "I knew you'd pick her up. You people always do. That's what you're for." The words hit like a slap. Before Mara could answer, Elias appeared, sliding between them with quiet speed. "Ma'am," he said evenly, "you need to leave." Trina jerked her chin at Mara. "Tell Victor he pays you all to feel clean," she spat. Then she looked at Celeste, at the sleeping child's soft face, and for a heartbeat guilt flickered, only to harden into spite. She stormed away as security arrived. Victor came home the moment he heard. He found Mara in the nursery, staring out the window as if expecting the world to return with teeth. Celeste slept peacefully in the crib. "I'm sorry," Victor said softly. Mara's shoulders shook. "I hate that I'm scared," she whispered. "I hate feeling like I don't belong anywhere." Victor felt the urge to fix it with orders and money, but he understood that fear wasn't a bill you could pay off. He stayed. He listened. He let the silence be uncomfortable, because it was honest. "You belong where you are safe," Victor said. "And I'm going to make sure that's true." He handed her a folder. Inside was a lease for a small, bright apartment near the river, secured in Mara's name, with no hidden conditions. "It's not charity," Victor said. "It's stability." Mara stared at the papers, trembling. "Why are you doing this?" Victor looked at Celeste, then back at Mara. "Because I was building a fortress and calling it a home," he said. "And you reminded me a home is made by people, not walls." Weeks passed. Trina's case moved forward. The agency tightened its standards. Halstead Tower held mandatory training. Mara's mother began treatment in San Rivas with supplies shipped weekly. Celeste learned to say "D" and "ma," and Victor pretended not to notice that she often said Mara's syllable first. On a quiet night, Victor asked Mara to ride with him. Elias drove them to Meridian Park. The streetlight by the bench had been replaced, bright, steady, unapologetic. Victor stood beside the bench, hands in his coat pockets, listening to the wind. "I come here to remember," he admitted. Mara looked at the bench, then at Celeste asleep in her stroller. "I felt ashamed that night," she said. Victor shook his head. "You were brave," he replied. "I was absent." He pressed a small pendant into her palm, a sailboat like the blanket stitches. "For luck," he said. "And for the promise I'm making." Mara closed her fingers around it. What promise? Victor lifted his gaze to the steady light. That the next time my child needs me, he said, she won't have to find me. I'll already be there. After that night, Victor began doing small things that never made headlines. Leaving his office before dark, reading Celeste's stories, learning which lullaby made her eyes droop. He stopped outsourcing every tender moment. Mara moved into the river apartment and, for the first time, slept without listening for angry footsteps in the hall. On Sundays, Victor walked with them to the harbor market, holding Celeste's hand instead of his phone. Brookhaven stayed loud and imperfect, but in their little home, it stayed safe and steady. That was the wealth he decided to protect.